Hey everybody, Joe Stofker here. I'm with Wisconsin for Cannabis, and today I'm interviewing Robert Burke, who's running for the Congressional District number 7. And for those of you who are not aware, that's way up in northern Wisconsin. Robert, do you want to kind of touch on that area?
Sure. The 7th Congressional District basically runs the east-west of I-94 and north, and then it runs along 94 south till just about Marshfield. And then, of course, it goes all the way through the northern side of the state by Eagle River and Eagle River and Ironwood, I believe. Michigan is about the northeast corner of that district. So it's a huge, massive district. If not for the internet, candidates like me would have a tough time being heard.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you look at the congressional district lines and how they're kind of funny. So, if you're in that area and you're seeing this, please make sure other people see it. And if you're not in that area and you're seeing this, please make sure that your friends and family in that area do get the chance to see this interview. That would be really awesome.
Yeah,
so
share this.
Robert ran for governor in the state of Wisconsin in this last election. And he was pro-marijuana, pro-cannabis, as I prefer to call it. So besides cannabis and the war on drugs, well, let's touch on that subject. What are your passions around, the war on drugs?
Well, obviously, when I ran for governor, I ran as a pro-cannabis candidate, 100% legalization. I didn't feel that it was smart for us to do this piecemeal. I actually took a trip out to Colorado in the midst of their expansion of legalization, and I learned a lot about what they had done right and what they did wrong. And I think one of the things that you can easily do wrong in legalization is do it piecemeal, doing medical and then doing recreational. You're best just to do the whole thing at once. But from the federal standpoint, one of the things that has to happen, and why I'm running for Congress, is the entire drug needs to be descheduled. Not Schedule 2, not Schedule 3, not Schedule 1. Cannabis needs to be completely removed from the entire Department of Drug Enforcement, the drug enforcement agencies listing of drugs that they prosecute whatsoever. And along with that, we need to release hemp as well. And that needs to go away because Wisconsin has one of the best states in the nation for growing hemp. And there's a lot of jobs in that. And while marijuana for a large swath of the population of Wisconsin may not be a very important issue, you have to look at it from a taxation standpoint. We spend a lot of money in the arrest and in the prosecution and in the eventual incarceration of individuals for a flower. What we need to do is we need to take that cost to our state and turn it around into a revenue. And that revenue means it's new shops. It means new jobs. It means small mom and pop grow operations that can help fund local communities. And the fact of the matter is the research is done. Marijuana is less dangerous than alcohol. Marijuana is easier to quit than alcohol. Marijuana has fewer long-term health effects than alcohol. And so I believe that if we want to do something positive for the health of Wisconsin, by reducing alcohol intake, marijuana will do that. If we want to help the economy of Wisconsin, marijuana legalization and hemp implementation will do that for the state. There's so many good things that can come out of this that when we realize the benefits of freedom, of liberty, the benefits of let industry do what it does best, which is find the best way to utilize a resource, what has always come out of that throughout history is a positive outcome for the common person. Well, I'm all for that.
Awesome. At Wisconsin for Cannabis, that's one of our big points is, total plant freedom. So the idea that you want to take recreational, medicinal, and hemp and not have it be, government regulated for this little bit, and then government regulated for this little bit, and then government regulated for this little bit, which, as a libertarian candidate is limiting government. So I just absolutely love that.
Bernie and both Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton have both come out as pro-legalization. The difference between having a libertarian legalize marijuana or actually decriminalize is what we do. Between a libertarian and those two individuals is that their model for legalization will have a massive regulatory infrastructure, and that infrastructure will mean that the only people that get licenses to grow marijuana will be large corporations. It'll be restricted from small individuals, and that doesn't help small mom and pop areas of Wisconsin. So you'll also, in that case, have high taxation. I mean, believe me, I know it sounds good when Bernie says, hey, we're going to legalize marijuana. You're going to be looking at a 50, 60, 70% tax on marijuana if you allow a Democrat, like, well, if you can call Bernie Sanders a Democrat, if you allow Bernie Sanders to legalize it. If you have a Libertarian who legalizes it, we will tax it at the same rate anything else in the economy is taxed at. Because we don't believe that a tax system should be used to drive social behavior. If you want to collect taxes, collect taxes. If you want to be fair about it, make it the same on all products. But when we make the tax on, for example, alcohol or marijuana or tobacco, what we call the sin taxes, when we make these really high, what we're really saying is the individuals who utilize these products have to pay a confiscatory tax, not because they did anything wrong and not because we need those dollars for anything special, other than we know you're going to demand the product, so we can charge you the tax we want. And I think that's a ridiculous tax system.
So as long as we're talking about taxes, how do you feel about taxes? And is there something that you would like to change if you win the seat here?
Well, I would support, should we get lucky enough and have a libertarian presidential candidate elected president, I would support Gary Johnson's plan for a national sales tax. And in fact, when I ran for governor, I supported a state sales tax model here in Wisconsin. The reason a sales tax works so well is, first and foremost, it gets rid of the IRS. And I don't think anybody in the 7th District thinks that that's a bad idea. Getting rid of the IRS should be the #1 goal of every single American out there. What do we replace it with? Well, we replace it with a simplified system of taxation that simply says any and all products that are purchased by the end user pay a simple, flat tax. And while people may say, well, Bob, isn't that going to mean that the poor are going to pay more in taxes than the rich? No, because the rich and the poor have different buying habits. For example, I used to use the mustard and motor car example. When you and I, when a poor person or somebody who's down on their luck goes and buys, for example, a bottle of mustard. Well, they're going to buy the generic bottle of mustard, maybe spend $1. So if the national sales tax is 5%, then they're going to pay a nickel in taxes on that. But when the wealthy person goes and buys their mustard, they're buying Plowman's, and maybe they'll buy in a second bottle of, Grey Poupon. They're going to spend $7 or $8 on their mustard. Well, if they spend $8 on their mustard, they're going to pay 40 cents in taxes on that. They're going to tax themselves voluntarily at a higher level. And this happens all the way up and down the entire economic system. When the poor go buy a car, they buy a used 2003 Chevy Malibu. When the rich go buy a car, they buy a brand new Mercedes every 2 years. If you let them tax themselves at a higher rate, they'll do that voluntarily. And it's a fair system because it allows people to make the decision of, do I want to spend money and be taxed, or do I want to save the money and invest? And we've got to get our people back to savings, because savings is what built the middle class in America.
And that's even from that example that you used with like the cheaper version of mustard versus the more expensive version of mustard, there's even a lot of economic things that are not seen that allow that mustard to be really cheap too, right?
Correct. And that's a part of, I know this is radical and people dislike the idea of eliminating the minimum wage, but the minimum wage isn't actually the problem that we need to deal with. The problem that we need to deal with is our money. It's our currency. If you took out a dollar bill right now and looked at it, our money isn't actually, produced by the federal government. I know on the back of the bill, for your viewers, I know on the back of the bill it says United States of America, but you have to look at the front of the bill on the very top. And in the front of the bill at the very top, you'll see it says Federal Reserve Note. Now remember, it says note. It doesn't say money. It doesn't say cash. It says note. That's because every single dollar in existence today is someone else's debt. I know this sounds hard to wrap your arms around, but in America, money is debt. Every dollar in your pocket represents somebody else's mortgage, somebody else's credit card, somebody else's cost. And this monetary system has created this inflation that we live under. Talk to your grandma, talk to your grandma. They'll tell you when they were growing up, they had no idea what inflation was. In the 1950s, inflation was less than 1%. That's stable prices. That's something that if you're poor and you earn $1, that means when you take that dollar home, if you don't spend it for 6 months, you still have $1 to spend. That doesn't happen today. Today, you take home $1. By the time you get it into your bank account, it's worth 98 cents. And by the time you go spend it, it's only worth 95 cents. That inflationary model of monetary system is something that I'm very much for changing. Minimum wage isn't the problem. Our currency is.
So as long as we're talking about currency and some financial issues, how do you believe the number one way that the government can go about starting to save money?
Well, we've got some huge promises that we've made with Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. We've got a giant military-industrial complex that needs to be reined in. And so one of the things that I've made as the cornerstone of my platform is peace. Right now, I am the only candidate on the ballot for peace. And I'm for peace because there are some really big things that can come out of this. We have literally spent the last 70 years at war. We have been in some war or another conflict this entire time. And in fact, the current set of wars, which would be from the Gulf War II, which would have been Iraq in 2003, and of course Afghanistan. Since then, we now have this expansion, this explosion of terrorism in the Middle East. This was caused by our invasion. And if we leave the Middle East will solve this problem of mass terrorism, believe it or not, all by itself. Our interference has caused much of these problems. So I would actually reduce our military intervention overseas to a significant level. We have almost 800 different types of bases around the world. We need to focus on protecting the borders of America. We need to focus on what technology we need in order to fight cyber wars and to defend our country from cyber attacks. That's a huge and very real issue that one of our presidential candidates, John McAfee, has brought up. But by doing this, by reducing that military-industrial complex, it allows us to do something else very important, Joe. There was a book written a number of years ago called The Fourth Turning. Have you heard of this book?
No.
It's a fascinating book. What it basically goes through is it goes through the idea that every about 20 years, America goes through a new phase. And in fact, every 80 years, we repeat this phase. The fourth turning of this phase has always been a war. So 80 years ago, it was World War II. 80 years before that, it was the Civil War. 80 years before that, it was the Revolutionary War. Well, we're at the precipice of that fourth turning, which means we have a choice right now. We can either gear up the war machine, suck more money out of the economy, and turn the whole planet to glass. And that's a very real risk. When I say turn the planet to glass, for those not familiar, that means nuclear war, ladies and gentlemen. And that's really where we're at. We have another choice, though, and that other choice is peace. What has always happened throughout history is that after those wars, you have a massive expansion of economic activity. Because what happens is that all of this innovation that we created within our war machine, that was classified, if you will, gets released for civilian use. Think about World War II. What was the biggest individual accomplishment in World War II, Joe? Well, it was the nuclear bomb. But when we turn that to peaceful uses, we got nuclear energy, and that helped to expand the economy at an unbelievable rate. There are over 6,000 classified patents already in America. Instead of going to war, let's go to peace. Instead of keeping these patents classified, let's release them. Instead of sending all of our engineers, all of our chemists, instead of sending all of our scientists to Lockheed Martin, to Boeing, and to all these other defense companies so we can find a new way to kill each other, let's use these people by setting them free to be innovators with these patents and these ideas. Let's turn this around, and instead of killing someone this time, let's make the decision that we're not going to war. We're going to skip that and go right to peace and have the innovation that comes from eliminating that military-industrial complex. It's a big idea, but I'm behind it 100%.
It sounds so beautiful to me, man. It sounds so beautiful. What things specifically in your congressional district are hot button topics for the people in your local communities?
When I ran for governor in 2014, we were just beginning the final slide into the collapse of the oil bubble that had been built by the Federal Reserve. So as we all know, in 2007, 2008, we had the collapse of the housing bubble in America. Well, not only did they reinflate the housing bubble, what they did, the Fed did, whether they know it or not, I think they did, they just won't admit it, was they also blew a massive bubble in our oil industry and in the oil complex globally. And beginning in late 2014, oil prices began falling. In fact, we're now down some 60 to 70% from the highs in oil. This has created a collapse in the oil industry of America. Frac sand companies have shut down in northern Wisconsin. We're down to probably 2 or 3 or 4 frac sand companies in Wisconsin. Most of them are in severe depression because we're not meeting any sand with the oil prices this low. This has what I like to call it is I like to call these mini economic bombs. These are miniature economic bombs that go off in our little communities. You know, some of these plants, for example, one that just closed over in Eau Claire, laid off 64 people. These people were making $35,000, $40,000, $45,000, $50,000 a year. They had cars, they had homes, they had boats, they bought motorcycles, right? They took vacations, they got credit cards. And now all of that infrastructure that was created around servicing their, well, let's call it their passions, all of those industries that were created around that are beginning to fall and collapse underneath it. The restaurants will begin closing. We're already seeing a huge collapse in retail sales in America. Again, all part of this collapsing economy that occurs when you blow asset bubbles like the energy bubble. So we've got a huge problem with that here in Wisconsin. It's perhaps the biggest reason why I think hemp is so important, because hemp is an industry that I think would thrive in Wisconsin and create a sustainable return of those jobs.
It was the first billion-dollar crop here in America, so I definitely think our farmers would much prefer a high profitable crop than, you know, getting by on the price of GMO corn.
You know, I want to make sure I get on record early on saying this because I want people to understand how important this next piece is. One of the products that can be created with hemp is called Hempcrete, which is concrete mixed with hemp. Now, what it does is it creates a lighter concrete and a stronger concrete, correct?
And a breathable concrete.
And a breathable concrete. So what ends up happening and what is being created right now in America, you can look this up. There are now companies that are working on technology to 3D print a house. If we were to create a hemp industry in Wisconsin, we would have every resource necessary to be the literal ground zero for the explosion of hempcrete homes in America. I'm talking about 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 square foot homes being built for $50,000, $60,000. I'm talking about taking homelessness. I'm talking about taking the cost of our living and collapsing that cost, which is wonderful because, well, we're already going to have a collapse in the value of our homes anyway because the bubble was reinflated. What it says is it says, now we can actually decide what we want to do with our free time. Because right now, think about it, Joe. We all work 40 hours a week to pay for our housing, to pay for our gas and electric, to pay for our insurances. The strength, the safety of a hempcrete house, the jobs that will be created in order to manufacture the 3D printers, all of this is economic activity that we just have to have the vision to go after. Because I really believe 3D houses printed with hempcrete is the next big industry in America, globally, I would even say.
Yeah, I love that. You know, one of the things about the idea that we do not farm hemp that really bothers me is like when you look at the world supply of hemp and where it comes from, like over 70% comes from China, and Americans buy hemp-made products like they're going out of style. And then the food that we buy for hemp, which is, you know, most people in Wisconsin for cannabis are already aware of how healthy hemp is for us. But then we buy that from our neighbor in Canada. So like essentially our GDP every time we make a hemp purchase is flying out of our country. Not just our state.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so these are all things that we could do to create new activities. You're absolutely right. I think the food product side of this is actually one of the things that's not appreciated well enough, because we're not just talking about food sources for human beings. We're talking about a new food source to feed the cattle. Right now, the cattle use an immense amount of bicarbonates because they're eating corn. Their body isn't designed to eat corn. It's designed to eat, well, roughage crops. And I believe they could probably, can they eat hemp? I'm guessing at least something in the hemp product can be produced for them. It will be better than corn.
I mean, I know the deer in the wild like hemp. I mean, there's wild hemp all over Wisconsin from when we used to farm it. You know, exactly. in the rural areas. So, yeah. I don't know, you know, for any of our viewers out there, you know, I'd love to bring Robert on and interview him again. So if you've got some questions that you'd like to hear him talk further on, you know, please leave some comments below. Please share the video. Before we close, is there any closing items that you'd like to say, Robert?
Yeah, listen, Joe, I appreciate you having me on for this interview. It's always nice to get a chance to talk to Wisconsin's marijuana legalization, cannabis legalization movement. Look, I'm a friend of your movement. I'm a big friend of the industry. I get it. I understand the importance of it. I understand the medical side of it. I understand the recreational side of it. I understand the hemp side of it. And I need help this election. I need a lot of help. Because this election, I'm really trying to make sure that not only does Washington, D.C. get the message that cannabis is important and that people will vote for pro-cannabis candidates, but I want Washington, D.C. to get the message. I'm coming. And when I get there, you better hope that I don't bring some friends. Because you ready for this? I've got a great idea for my first bill. I'm going to eliminate the pensions and health care benefits of all previous members of Congress. You can bank on that one.
I love it. Thank you for your time today, Robert. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joseph. Take care.